Time it is 7 o'clock, so let's get going. The audio is working. Zoomers, if I could ask you again to please be muted. What we have here is a directional speaker that will turn around, and if it hears a noise, it will aim at that person talking. So hopefully we won't break into Chris's talk. We're a little bit pressed for time tonight. We are recording this session and we'll put it up on board. Again, Zoomers, I told you in the chat, I will monitor the chat throughout the evening, and if we've got questions during the Q&A from the floor, we'll be able to take them, and the Zoomers will be able to, I'll try to track them and bring those into the conversation as well when we get to the end. In 60 seconds, thank you all very much for coming. We've got 27 people that have dialed in, so we've got a good group here tonight for a very important subject. On behalf of the Rappahannock League for Environmental Protection, the Rappahannock County Library, and the Piedmont Environmental Council, thank you all for coming. And thank you, Chris and Dave Aldridge from PEC and Sarah for coming out tonight to talk to us about this very important topic. And again, because we're pressed for time, and Chris has a lot of information to get through, I'm going to turn the floor over to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to stand over here just to be out of the way. Thank you for having me out here. Thanks. It's always a great relief to come over the border in Rappahannock. So I took a half an hour drive up Good Brown Hollow just to get soak in the atmosphere. You have a truly wonderful space, and I think many years of hard work to keep it that way. So this is all in the spirit of sharing information. We have lots of ideas and information and even opinions, but we don't have all the answers. So ask your questions and reveal your skepticism, and maybe that'll help people understand how complicated this issue really is. But about 5 years ago, we started to observe a phenomenon, which was there were proposals for these large buildings called data centers outside of places we had planned for them in Loudoun County. And Loudoun County has been a center of data center and tech industry and innovation for a long time. And the comprehensive plan in Loudoun County had set aside quite a large area of land, more than 10,000 acres, for data center development. Now, 2018, there started to be proposals in places that didn't seem appropriate. In this case, it was on the banks of the Goose Creek Reservoir, so the drinking water supply for part of the supply in Northern Virginia. So we started saying, well, why are you doing that? That seems insane, especially since modern data centers have on-site storage of backup fuel for their backup generators, in which, in this case, it's diesel fuel. So you have a large diesel tank on the banks of your reservoir. That just seems like a bad idea. But the incentives for the county was this was a huge economic investment, and they were going to expand their tax base by converting land that was supposed to be conserved into industrial property, and then also being able to tax the computer equipment. So fast forward to 2023, there were numerous proposals for data centers outside the area where they were planned, not just in Loudoun County, but we started to realize it was a kind of a statewide phenomenon. You go to the next line. We realized that most people, including ourselves, had no idea what we were talking about. A modern data center is usually 100 to 250,000 square feet. They used to be low profile, 35 or 40 feet high. Now, most of them are looking for height elevations of up to 100 feet, so they can do 2 stories. And if you can click through, it's a combination of electric connections to the grid, diesel backup generators that have to equal 100% of their peak load, cooling equipment, because these are huge heat producers, and then on-site fuel storage. So those are sort of some of the, the footprint of all of that. And the potential air quality and water quality issues sort of are central to our concerns if they're cited in places where those are complicated. The backup diesel generators are huge. These are 300 each one of these is 3 megawatts. So, that ends up being quite a lot. There are 4,000 of these in Northern Virginia, with a total of 11 to 12 gigawatts of power supply. That's a lot. That's 2/3 of the total generating capacity in Virginia. So it's not insignificant. And it's the dirtiest form of combustion that we know. Running a diesel generator is not your preferred outcome. Inside of the data center kind of looks like that. It's just stacks and stacks of servers, a lot of wiring and a lot of cooling equipment. Next slide. They're all cut off from society. What a lot of people don't think about though is that's just on site. Off site, you have the combination of the footprint of the building, but you also have to account for the electrical transmission, the substations, and then the generation. In the case of Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic, it is a combination of nuclear, natural gas, some renewables. But increasingly, they're looking at natural gas as the fastest way to bring more generation online. Next one. The huge amount of electricity. Next slide. And it actually, electrical load is the way the real estate industry calculates the sort of the size of the data centers. Square footage is kind of irrelevant now. It's really what is the capacity to run electricity through the building. This map, if you can't see the detailed writing, this is major metropolitan areas all around the world. And the line on the far left says Virginia. And that, as you can see, that's 5 to 10 times everything, including Beijing. There's a big cluster in Oregon. Down on the other end of Los Angeles is down on this end, Las Vegas. So Northern Virginia is by far the biggest concentration of this technology globally. 5.5 megawatts, that's 5.5 gigawatts. That's a lot of power. It's the equivalent of all the nuclear power generation we have in Virginia, plus another nuclear power plant we haven't built. So that's our entire baseload supply, basically. And that's a lot. Yeah.
Sorry, I was misunderstanding where the 5,500 megawatts is coming from. Is that a combination of all those across? Is that just America?
No, that's just Virginia.
Is it?
The vertical axis is four. It says 4.5. It's gone up. It's gone up a gigawatt since this slide.
Thank you. Appreciate
Fair
that.
question. Yeah. I think this one is from late 2024, and I think since that time that amount of capacity has come online. Next slide. So that's why we have an issue here. We're the biggest in the world, and it's moving fast. Because of that, we're already importing about 26% of the total load into Virginia. And that's not just because of data centers. That's market driven and pricing and other things. But Virginia already has a big gap between what it produces internally and what it needs to import through transmission. So one of the big issues is new transmission capacity, probably along existing rights of way. Guess what comes through Rappahannock? There are 2 significant transmission corridors already in place. Next slide. How much bigger will it get? Big question, starting to get crystallized. According to Dominion Energy's latest figures, we're looking at around 51 gigawatts in their territory where they provide generation and transmission services. This is not where they have retail. It includes all of the electric cooperatives that they basically serve. So that's their current running estimate. It keeps going up. There are other estimates that peg that at 70 gigawatts. It's a lot of power because our existing load is really about 20, 22. And that means that the times a year where we use the most electricity, the hottest 7 days, the coldest 7 days, that's how much power has to be on the grid. And the whole system has to be designed for those peak loads plus the reserve capacity factor. So when that goes up, you have to build it out, whether or not you use that every day. There's some offsetting technologies and ideas to try to reduce how much that peak grows. But that's the current estimate. So roughly a doubling or tripling of the system in the next 20 years. That's pretty fast. For the last 30 years, it hasn't grown much at all. And so we're going from a steady state to this huge increase in size. Next slide. We all are responsible. We all use stuff. But what's really driving this is generative AI. Running quadrillions of calculations on huge data sets. Just uses an enormous amount of computing power. And that's where the power demand comes from primarily. Next slide. So that's why we got a weird phenomenon. Right now we're promoting AI dominance and the energy that's needed to get there. That's the official policy of the United States. Frankly, it's bipartisan. It's been announced as a Trump policy, but it was also a Biden policy. Let's just say it's bipartisan. And, you know, it's the biggest explosion of a single economic sector that we've ever seen. It's just no fun. I think the latest calculation was 124 gigawatts of additional power load across the nation. That's just an enormous amount. So we're dealing with the cumulative impacts of that on air, water, land, and our communities. Next slide. By the way, all these slides are going to be available to you. We'll send them out in some way. It's a huge file, so we'll have to think about how to make it available, but you're welcome to the information. So what makes it different? We've already done that one. Next slide. Yeah, we go.
Oh, hang on.
All right. We'll get there. Go forward. One more. One more. So how do we know about power demand? Well, you know, we've been tracking Dominion's contracting. What we have right now is what we call a crisis by contract. Dominion has said it has an obligation to say yes. It's negotiated yes. And the cumulative effect of those negotiations are these electric service agreements, which create a binding relationship. Yeah. Are we okay? Did we lose?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're having a little syncing problem.
Okay. I think we switched from slides to. Yeah.
Pay no attention.
Next slide. So anyway, we've tried to validate this by really understanding where the demand is coming from. These are this is data from their negotiated agreements. The next slide. Okay. I think you need to go to the slideshow. Yeah. You've not done anything until you try to do this in Bill Irwin's field. Using solar power. That is challenging. This is easy. Yeah.
Yep.
Just use the right and left there. Right.
Thank you. So. Next slide if you can. Next one. One more. There you go. That's a good one. So, you know, just in 1 6-month period, we've seen the estimate go up from 21 gigawatts to 40. When you see that rate of change in any economic sector, it's just, it means that we don't really have a handle on it. We don't know what it means. All the public officials I've talked to, they lose it right here. They don't know what this means. They don't know what it means in terms of power plants, transmission lines, substations. And in fairness, most people don't. Right now, there are 50 substation approvals in front of the State Corporation Commission.
Excellent.
There's probably 10 transmission lines working their way through the system. Rate cases from every utility. And the lawyers' heads are exploding because they're trying to process, you know, the normal procedure is like blown out of the water because there's just so much information, so many filings coming in simultaneously.
One question on
Yeah.
your demand there as it's growing and your projections. Is there a consideration, and I don't know if this is technologically possible, for the existing data centers to upgrade and modernize and draw more power on their footprint that's already accepted?
It's not built in necessarily because they'd have to come back and renegotiate their agreements. But that is a concern.
Big time.
What we've gone from is 9 watts per square foot to 450 watts per square foot as a working estimate of potential power load. And so next slide. You know, it's not limited to Dominion. This is the curve for Rappahannock Electric Cooperative. A 446% increase in their load to, I think, next slide, I think it's 18 gigawatts. No, that's a little high. Did you skip one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is from an SEC filing on Friday. That's why I had to get my slides early, because there's still stuff coming in. And you see the 16 gigawatts? This is an electric cooperative whose total demand over a large area was less than a gigawatt. And it's talking about this happening in 7 years, mostly around Fredericksburg. So everybody's saying time out, this is getting really way beyond our experience and actually, we don't have answers for all the questions. Proper rate structures and policies are critical to maintaining this balance. That's a recurring theme. We are right now in litigation in front of the SEC to change the rate structure, primarily so that existing residents don't get trapped with stranded investments that don't pan out. If the data centers actually use all this power and are billed for it, probably okay, but if they don't, who's gonna pay for it? And the fear is that existing ratepayers would get stuck with a big bill. There's a big negotiation going on. We're an intervener in that case and trying to make the case that 90% of the capital costs need to be covered by the data center industry to protect everybody else. Next slide. And so this is more about where things are happening. We have an online map. Sarah maintains the database, Sarah Parmalee back here. We crowdsourced every data center we heard about. Then Sarah found the applications. So each one of these has this is a interactive live site. So there's current information about how big and where it is in the process. Next slide. And when go back one. This is important, this number. Next, go forward one, right?
It's slipping, sorry.
What it says is
Oh, there we go. That's one.
there's 60 million already on the ground. This is quite a lot, right? And I'll tell you what, give you a comparison. There's another 200 million that's in the process, and most of it's already obscene. So by comparison, all the retail, commercial, and industrial space in Northern Virginia, which they calculate for impervious surface in the Chesapeake Bay area, is about 150 million square feet. So in basically 5 years, we're going to be initiating construction on more development than we've ever had in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And that's an important water quality issue, just that amount of pervious surface, separate from what it's for. Next slide. Here's a cluster. I tried to zoom in for you. This is the Rappahannock zoom in. Big cluster in Prince William County, right around Gainesville and Haymarket. Another cluster coming in around Remington. and a big cluster of mostly approved facilities in Culpeper. And there's a map outside that shows that in detail. What you should keep in your head is each one of those sites is less than 100 acres. The total, so 260 million square feet sounds like a lot, right? It's really a less than 100,000 acres. So statewide, that's not the issue. It is a big issue, but it's not the issue. It's the energy infrastructure that then has to support all of that and the water consumption that comes with it. Next slide. So I'm just showing that you can zoom in on any particular one if you're interested. Next slide. And this is a map of Culpeper with the approved data centers and some attempt to show you what they look like and how they occupy the sites. But each one of these is not a huge amount of land, and it's a lot of square footage times 300. We use 300 watts per square foot as a sort of conservative estimate. Is that right, Sarah?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that whole block represents around 2 gigawatts of new energy demand coming online.
Which is all of the power that North Anna produced. That's the entire production of our offshore wind facility that we're still not sure we're gonna bring online. So it's not an insignificant number, it's a huge number. Next slide. This is your special map we've been working on. This is my horror map for Rappahannock County. It's trying to identify parcels over 100 acres that are not under conservation easement within 3 miles of an existing transmission line.
Yeah.
So all of those red parcels are the same, generically the same as what's in Culpeper and Remington. So remember, you do have a transmission line coming into Sperryville. And then it comes down from Sperryville, and another branch of it runs along 211. It's a very low voltage transmission line, but the policy is to use existing rights of way and expand them. You have one of the largest transmission lines in Virginia coming along the Rappahannock River. And that's already being projected for an upgrade, which means, increasing its carrying capacity, but rebuilding in place mostly. But it's also been proposed as a place to double up, put another parallel circuit. And then this line here is one that was proposed to PJM, which is the regional transmission organization, to run to Warrenton. And that would be a new 230 kV line. So these things are not speculative in terms of the existence of transmission. I'm just trying to give you something to worry about.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I only say that so that you know that it does potentially implicate somewhere in Rappahannock County. It doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to think about someone coming in and saying, well, if you let me do it here, this property that's worth 10,000 an acre will be worth 2 million an acre. And the county gets the benefit of that property tax plus all the equipment inside. And you could have an additional $10 to $20 million in revenue a year. Now, you guys know the budget of Rappahannock County. $20 million a year off of 100 acres could be transformational in terms of things that could be delivered. So every county is having this conversation. It's not. And so you imagine how Madison County was going, well, gosh, we could do everything and have no taxes on anyone else, right? So, next slide. And over the last year, what we've been working on is trying to educate the media about this issue, and we've had some success. So we now have got, coverage from the Wall Street Journal, the data center industry newsletters and magazines. Next slide. And just on Wednesday, I guess that's yesterday, we had a story in the Wall Street Journal about the rate case around the country, including Virginia. And we like it because I was quoted in it, but what the reporter is, excellent reporter. She's been covering this issue for quite some time. And what she focuses in on is every state that has a significant increase in data center development is facing this question of who's going to pay for the increased energy. It was a good article. We have copies of it printed out. So we just want to make sure everyone had a chance to read it, and those are on the table in the back there. It's a good summary of the sort of the rate case question. Next slide. That's fine. You know, we're not the only ones saying it. Harvard's electricity law initiative is saying the same thing. Ratepayers are being asked to subsidize the 7 wealthiest corporations in the world. Next. This is the case. Actually, this is something you guys ought to comment on. The public hearing, the public comment is open until August 26th. There's a chance to speak in person in Richmond on September 2nd. We'll be sending out an action alert next week with details of what you might think of saying, but every ratepayer in Virginia, whether you're a Dominion customer or an REC customer, runs the risk of significant increases in your bills if they don't change the structure of how we allocate costs. Our testimony, direct testimony by expert witnesses available. Hopefully that'll help you understand what you want to say. Next slide. So let's zoom into sort of the local impacts, just to get you nervous. We do this on a day-to-day basis. Next slide. We're gonna use Fauquier as an example because they're the favorite kicking horse for you guys. Every time I come out, it's like, we don't want to turn into Fauquier. And they say the same thing about Loudon, and Loudon says that about Fairfax. That's how it goes. So the reason why I use this is that this is what's happening in Remington. How many of you have been to Remington? It's a small town. Was it 10 blocks square basically? And we are now proposing to put in enough data centers for basically, you know, 2/3 of North Anna's power production. And this would be anywhere else in the world. Go back to that original slide. This is the equivalent of London. Entire data center processing capacity in Remington. Right? Next slide. And they're talking about it seriously. Keep going, just go to the next slide. They're talking about it seriously as if, well, if we don't say yes, what will happen? As if this was something they were counting on and it was part of their planning. No one even contemplated any of this scale 3 years ago. So nobody's fiscal plan is based on having 5 gigawatts of data centers. But the temptation is there, right? So how do you evaluate these proposals? Next slide. Next slide, we've seen that one. So these are some of the issues. Traffic during construction, the compatibility of these large buildings next to residential or other uses. Lighting is a big issue because they have a lot of security lighting. Energy uses, air quality, noise, water vapor plumes. And how do you provide the fire protection? In Remington, they're building a new water tower. It's being sort of sold as an improvement of the water supply. It's almost entirely for fire suppression. So, because they had to build it out. Next slide. These are the ones that we tend to focus on. Because they're the ones that have the biggest range of effects. Next slide. So, this is what Loudon's done to itself in the last 2 years. And these neighborhoods are now litigating or petitioning to rezone as data centers so they can sell and get out. And they're only 5 years old. These are HOAs that were created 10 years ago and they finally built out. They've only been there for 5 years and they're already ready to leave because of the constant noise from the air handlers. And so that's the worst case scenario. This is what's happened in that. Next slide. So here's some things think about in terms of, these are in your distant future, so you don't have to worry about them. But you have this slide if you want to go back and think about the zoning ordinance or special use permits. What should they consider? This is the local direct neighbor impacts. Next slide. Energy usage. So this is just, realize that this is how much is coming in. Next slide. A lot of words here. What the industry is looking for is capacity on existing transmission And then what would the cost be to expand that capacity? They kind of assume the cost of a substation is something they're gonna have to pay for, because there aren't any substations big enough for this amount of power. Each data center, the data centers in Remington, each of the buildings consumes more power than the entire county. And that would certainly be the case in Rappahannock. So
Could you say that one more time? You said the.
each one of the buildings is consuming about 100 to 300 megawatts. And if you go look at the load in Fauquier County, the whole county doesn't have that load.
Okay.
All the residents and all the small businesses. So whenever you say yes to a building, you're changing the infrastructure by a factor of 10, right? So you're starting to bigger and bigger. Next slide. So luckily, these things have to be approved by SCC, so that's one place where you can weigh in. But in the case of substations, next slide. Oops, you skipped over, which are big. These are 20, 30 acre.
Chris, what's the SDC?
State Corporation Commission. That's our Public Utility Commission. It's constituted in the Virginia Constitution and in code. And it has a robust set of authorizations. The challenge is getting them to use it. Included in their authorization is consideration of impacts on environment, history, and beauty, and the mitigation thereof. But we've been challenged to get them to actually exercise that authority. So that's one of our goals going forward. This is the size of the substations that are now being built. 20 to 50 acres. Right. So, so pay attention, because if they talk about upgrading the substation in Sperryville, you're gonna get out of hand really quickly.
Can I reverse my question?
Sure.
Which is, power usage on the footprint as it upgrades, internal to
Right.
what's approved. Is the trend with computer and quantum drawing less power and you go the other way if you can?
More efficiency, but it's all being consumed by the desire to run more
Oh,
calculations. So there's a theory about it, but what we've seen in technology, all of us have seen, is the more we can do, the more we do.
yeah, okay.
And generative AI by its very nature says, give me all information, I'll run against all other information, and we'll see what patterns emerge. It's a very inefficient process, and the inefficiency is revealed in electricity.
There it is.
The chips are incredibly efficient
Right.
per square inch, but all that meant is the power density per square foot in the building went up.
So there's no silver lining.
There's no the footprint of the buildings aren't getting enormously larger, but the energy consumption per square foot is going through the roof.
If data analysis changed, that would be a big step forward.
So limited AI, there's different terminologies, but AI that's targeted on a specific task, they are getting more and more efficient. But generative AI by its very nature is trying to run bigger and bigger models. So there's a tension there. And so a lot of this is generative AI driven. If they fix that, then there might be a reduction in the projected use.
Yes, sir.
And that's where the stranded costs become an issue.
Mhm.
So that's why the utilities are saying, whoa, well, wait a minute, if you do gain these efficiencies, who's on the hook for all the capacity we build in? So,
That's a good point.
yeah, that's exactly why that rate case is what we're focused on.
Mhm.
My quote in the Wall Street Journal, the reporter read all the testimony and asked all the industry people to comment. They wouldn't.
Yeah, sure.
This is what she said. Dominion estimated we'll have to invest more than 40 billion in the state over the next 5 years to serve data center demand. That's roughly equivalent to the value of its entire system in history. So like in 1 4-year period, 5-year period, they'd be doubling their entire capital investment. My quote is, we think this is the most important decision being made in America about who pays for energy. How do you make sure residential users aren't being asked to subsidize these giant global corporations? You don't believe me? Go look at their assets and revenues. These are the 13 largest corporations. And we're being asked to subsidize right now at about a 40% rate. So it's kind of stunning. Next slide. This is what a dual 500 kV circuit looks like. So if they expanded what goes through Rappahannock, they'd add the second one. Next slide. This is what 230 can look like. This is along Route 7. Next slide. And we just wanted to make sure you didn't think we were making up. This is what already exists in Rappahannock. So,
Oh.
yeah.
Thanks, Rob. for that.
And actually John Warner.
It was Warner?
Yeah, he cut a deal.
Used to too.
Yeah. Next, I can tell you that story after.
Yeah.
Next slide. I was in the room.
Yeah.
Backup generators, we talked about that. Next slide. They're big, they're smelly. They use a lot of diesel. Next slide. You don't want them next to your schools and houses. We have maps to show where they are and how they're upwind of things like schools, parks, and daycare. Next slide. You know, it's starting to get some attention. But the president announced last Wednesday he was gonna suspend the Clean Air Act as applied to AI. We're gonna need Judge Tatel to help us think about how you challenge all that. I think we're gonna be in the courts as a party sometime in the next 6 months on that issue. Right now, we're in a very high stress period on the grid. And they're talking about waiving the restrictions on existing generators to take the pressure off the grid. And that would be the equivalent of turning on 12 gigawatts of diesel during the worst pollution periods in the year. So you would be triggering a violation of the Clean Air Act. And I don't think that the Supreme Court has ruled that that's okay. But someone's gonna have to test it. If that happens. Well, it might be us. Might be you. Next slide. We've got a whole network of volunteers who are starting to do volunteer monitoring, because the whole state of Virginia only has 5 official air quality monitors. Everything else is modeled.
No.
Yeah. Next slide. That's fine. Keep going.
What are they burning in that?
That's diesel.
That is diesel.
They're talking about switching to natural gas, which would be cleaner, but it's still polluting, you know.
Is that the right slide?
Yeah, so this is how bad it's gotten allowed. These are all stacked up next to WO&D Trail, which is the one of the most popular recreational facilities. But what's really important is people are exercising. So if you know anything about air quality impacts, deep breathing of small particulate matter from diesel generators is really not, that's a toxic, that's not good. It's a direct toxin. All right, next slide. Next one, that they're building more natural gas capacity in anticipation of building more generators. Next slide. I want to just give time for questions here. We consume a lot of water, keep going. Mostly evaporated out. They talk about closed systems, but there is evaporative loss. Just give you perspective, the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin staff scientists concluded using conservative estimates of water consumption for data centers that are in the system. Data centers would consume 200 million gallons per day in a river that has 600 million gallons daily flow. So we are moving to competition between existing uses for drinking water and other purposes and data centers. It's a closed set. In Loudon, we've seen a huge increase in not only gray water, which was the original source for a lot of this, but also potable water. As these systems get more complex, the water they use needs to be cleaner. Next slide. So what can you do? Well, that's right. That's the trend. Scary. These numbers are all changing all the time, but just the direction is what you see.
Is there a trend to go air cooled?
Well, that uses more energy. So it's kind of, it's scary. You can't it's like all big things. You can't eliminate everything. So you're trying to find a balance. Our frustration is we can't even get authority from the General Assembly to aggregate water consumption. That's been deemed a national security risk for public officials to know how much water is being consumed. The Department of Homeland Security called the Democratic and Republican leadership last session and had them pull legislation that was moving forward to require data centers to report to DEQ on their water consumption. And that was the explanation given.
Very obvious.
It would allow our enemies to be able to calculate which data centers, how they would know that from aggregate numbers, which data centers were using power and water, and they would know what they were doing. Next slide. It's very hard to have these discussions in the halls of the General Assembly. So, you know, these are just some concerns. Remember, these are all slides you can look at later when you need them, but these are the kinds of issues that have come up. Next slide. Back to, that's why we think you ought to pay attention, because if you just get one of these, where's the water gonna come from? Groundwater? How deep are the wells now? 300 feet plus? So probably not. So are they gonna be able to get a withdrawal off the Rappahannock? There was a lot of water this year, but I can remember last year where we had to cancel a canoe trip down by Remington because there wasn't enough water. So I'm not sure that that's a good assumption. We know that Amazon is acquiring whatever water rights it can upstream of Fredericksburg right now from existing withdrawal plants. Next slide. So, you know, this is detailed stuff about what you don't want to do. Don't give general permission to do by right data centers in a large area. We call that blob planning. It's very imprecise and it doesn't give you any handle. Next slide. You have lots of ordinances to look at and glean from. Sarah will be glad to help you identify the things you're most interested in, but you know, this is becoming an area of experience and practice, and we're happy to help you look at those and find the language that works the best. Next slide. Go back one. Because I think I was gonna stop there. Basically, there's a question like, how do you do this in a way that isn't bad for the environment? And there probably are long-term solutions that involve a lot of battery storage of renewable resources and more careful planning about when the data centers can run and what's called demand response on their part, where they lower their peak loads. So the overall size of the system can shrink. But those are gonna take a while to do. So these are the three things never to do. Don't sign a non-disclosure agreement with a company that's applying for, you know, a rezoning. Make sure that the county never does that. That ought to be a electoral quiz. Make sure you meet regularly with your utilities and ask them hard questions. They tend to be very evasive. And David asked them about the transmission line over through the national park into Sperryville. What was their answer? It was just routine maintenance. They're just cutting down trees that were potentially gonna fall on it, and don't you worry about the wider right. Those are questions that the observer will follow. Do you have any plans? Have you heard of any plan? You know, just have to keep, but basically you're gonna just have to watch for the first sign.
And no upgrades to the substation.
Yeah. So stop there. What questions do you have? There's a whole theory of distributed generation that we're working on, where we could handle about half of that 40 gigawatt load by doing things locally in a much smaller scale. But that's got a lot of roadblocks ahead of it in the General Assembly. So
you may have said it, but what's the reason for Virginia becoming the hub of data centers?
I think there's about 7 factors. One is that DARPA did a lot of the early investment in the internet for the government in Ashburn, in Fairfax. So there was a sort of critical mass of engineering and IT expertise. Then there was a major intersect of 2 big fiber optic cables in Ashburn that really join south to north and east to west. So we're a hub from terms of fiber optics, is which is how all this data is moved around. Now it's a combination of that with critical mass of facilities in place, the trained employees to run them. And then increasingly, there's discussion of the problem of latency between data centers. So they're trying to pack the data centers as close as they can together to reduce the time for those quadrillions of calculations. So I think when you get to the engineering of quadrillions of calculations, every centimeter makes a difference.
And a big customer to government.
And then there's some weird things, relatively low incidence of earthquakes. No violent tropical storms. We got lots of tropical storms, but they tend to have already diminished in power. So it's a reasonably stable environment. And then there was a perception that A, there was a surplus of power, and B, Dominion could get whatever it wanted in Virginia.
Are modular nuclear power generation facilities mounted at site a viable option?
I think the technology in theory is viable, right? Because we already do it on nuclear aircraft carriers, submarines, right? We know we can make a smaller reactor that can produce power. But, a nuclear aircraft reactor is less than 15 megawatts. So one data center now is 100 to 300 megawatts. So it's an awful lot of modular reactors to meet that load. And the expense is no less, right?
It doesn't solve your cooling.
Doesn't solve your cooling, and it's more expensive actually per unit than a larger reactor. And those run at 10 billion per gigawatt. So that's, it's technologically achievable, and there's some reasons why it might make sense, but it isn't cheap. Yeah. Probably the most exciting area is enhanced geothermal, where you use heat exchange either by drilling really deep to the mantle or horizontally into areas that are already hot, but not necessarily that deep. Certain places like Nevada, that makes all the sense. Iceland, the offset there is they're not geologically stable, so you run the risk of earthquake. So everything has give takes, but geothermal looks like one where there's sort of a theoretically unlimited capacity, and it's not generally as complicated or toxic as nuclear power. Natural gas is probably the thing that they think they can, ramp up the fastest, but the backlog in generators, units, and other things is pretty significant.
Chris, I think we've kind of morphed into Q and A.
Yeah.
So why don't we do Q and A? Do a few minutes we've got left. And thank you, everybody that wrote in. We've got a couple of questions from online as well. One question was, could you say a few words about the relationship between conservation easements as protection vis-a-vis somebody that wants to put in a power line through a conservation easement? Will conservation easements protect us here in Rappahannock?
So they'll enhance your negotiating capacity. And historically, utilities and public decisions tend to try to avoid them. But if there is a public justification for the transmission line, there is also a justification to condemn the interest in the conservation easement. So the question is, what's the adequate compensation? Remember, eminent domain can be exercised for a public purpose, but the real question is, what's the just compensation? And in the case of the public interests that are involved, it gets kind of complicated. You have to pay back the years of tax benefits. You have to pay back the tax credit. Who gets the money? What is the compensation for the loss of conservation value? So there's some real complicated issues, but they're ones that would have to be litigated. So it's not an absolute protection because the federal government ultimately has sovereignty, right? And so it gets into the kilo. Judge, you might have a different perception.
No,
Yeah.
but I just have a question.
Yeah.
Could you say something, talk a little bit about the role of the federal government in all this? And a couple of features of it. One is, regulatory.
Mhm.
With various regulatory commissions. Number two is, Trump, like Biden, has said, we're gonna be a leader in AI. And Congress just passed some new AI bill, and I understand that the, quote, big beautiful bill has a lot of stuff in it that will affect this, so can you talk a little bit about that?
So we're still dissecting, it's a little vague, but basically what its direction is. The National Environmental Policy Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, wetlands regulation, protection of historic resources, and the use of public land are all being evaluated for how they can be streamlined or amended. Use of categorical exclusions under NEPA, all designed to accelerate the rollout of new data centers and the energy infrastructure they need. What does that mean on a practical level? If you have a categorical exclusion for a 5 gigawatt AI facility on public lands, that means no one's doing any meaningful review of the specifics of that. So the other part of the executive order said that excess lands on Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and Bureau of Land Management properties shall be made available for this purpose. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Rocky Flats, Colorado.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's a site where they build nuclear weapons and refine.
Allegedly.
No, I think it's well known. And so it's a huge reservation because there's a lot of contaminated soils and it was just safer to fence it off. And it's right sort of in between Aurora and, it's not in the middle of nowhere, but it is on the plain. And so that's a place where they're thinking about, well, we really can't let people do anything else here. The wildlife is welcome, but it passes through. Let's put data centers here and have the energy generation right on site. That may actually make some sense, right? Like that or a DoD facility. That probably is logical. But in addition to that, they're talking about things like taking land from the Manassas National Battlefield Park to provide the transmission to go to the 22 million square feet of data centers approved next door. Not taking land from the data center development, but from a national park that's beloved by many for different reasons, right? And that's gonna come up in the next month or two. We'll know, Judge, whether that means they're gonna claim it's a categorical exclusion or they're gonna use a 14-day review or something. They're gonna try to do something to say that here's how we will streamline the process. Taking a park, converting it to energy infrastructure to benefit a private data center operation. I think that will offend a lot of people. There might be a pushback on that.
As an individual person who's not wealthy and doesn't have political power, like what would you recommend is the best actions that we could take?
And could you repeat the question?
Sure. What can we do as average citizens and not with organizational resources, but individually? The slide I showed you about sending in comments on the rate review by the State Corporation Commission, that's the place where you have the most affirmative chance to weigh in. And I think, that's really a legal and administrative decision, but overwhelming the public comment with real comments from real people saying, I can't afford an extra $100 a month on my bill to pay for Google. That's a fair comment. And we will be sending out an alert on that, but that's happening now. They're gonna make a decision this fall. It will be a case of first impression of how they're gonna deal with these large concentrations of power demand. And I think if they get it right, then the industry is gonna have to be more responsible because they'll be paying for it. It's pretty easy to be unlimited in your power use if you can get 40% of it paid for by someone else.
How do we make sure we get the alert?
We're gonna send it out broadly. We'll send it out to partners. We're actually gonna do digital advertising all around the state. They're gonna have more comments than they've ever had.
The other thing is.
But we'll get it to you, and it's in these slides.
The other thing is make sure your elected officials hear from you on this topic.
you now know more than a lot of our elected officials.
At
Like
what
what level?
All
State
levels.
and federal,
Yeah.
all levels. But even
In
local.
fairness, Michael Weber understands this issue. He's been a real ally in trying to get some reason on it. And Senator Perry has been a stalwart leader. So there's actually a bipartisan group of about 18 legislators who've worked to try to, they call it the 4 pillars of data center reform. And they moved a block of 18 bills last session, only one of which got to the governor's desk and then he vetoed it. So, yeah.
It takes a while, but are you guys picking up cancer clusters around these sites yet? Or around the lines?
What the immediate effects we're hearing is noise.
Noise.
And it's a combination of constant irritation and the fact that the frequencies are apparently in the spectrum that causes a fear of flight reaction in animals and in human beings. So it runs at a level that causes constant anxiety.
Yes. Well.
Judd?
We're done. Next to the last question, and then we got one from online, so go ahead, Judd.
Yeah.
Chris, what, I mentioned when I came in, I read a couple weeks ago that Google and Amazon, and they're all upset about what just happened in Ohio.
Yeah.
What did Ohio do? Is that relevant to us?
Yeah. So Judge Taylor asked about a case that was just resolved in Ohio with American Electric Power, where the Public Utility Commission issued a new tariff on large energy users over 25 megawatts, so capturing most data centers. And they assigned, I think it was 90% of the costs over a 14-year period in enforceable contracts. It sounds good, actually. That's very, encouraging headline. But the utility doesn't control the generation costs. So that was really just about transmission. Generation in Ohio is an open market, so. It left unanswered who's gonna pay for the generation. Yeah, the Virginia case is interesting because Dominion has a retail monopoly in large portions of the map. And then also provides services to the co-op, so it's got 2 roles. And this is about their base rate case, so it's about the retail side, but everybody should be paying attention. After that, I'm out of my league. It's complicated stuff.
And final question, in 60 seconds or less, I'm
Yeah.
60 minutes kind of reporter.
Sure.
A lot of questions online about zoning. At one time, you said you shouldn't mention data centers in your zoning ordinance. Now maybe that's changed. Is our zoning ordinance going to protect us? Again, in 60 seconds or less, what should we think about zoning in Rappahannock County?
I think you should take a second look. I think we've provided a lot of things to think about. It certainly should not be a by right use in any place. You should strengthen the zoning ordinance as it applies to substations. That's probably your biggest control. And then you should be prepared to spend a couple of years while you have time thinking through all the details of what you do want in your zoning ordinance. We've learned a lot. It will seem like a waste of time because nobody really thinks one will come here. But I tried to show you why I think that's just not. There's no comfort that comes from the fact we haven't seen one yet. We never thought they would be in Remington. We really didn't think they'd be in the town of Culpeper next to the National Cemetery. We just didn't. They built a data center next to Salubria on Route 3.
And if there's interest, certainly it was the lead stop for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Prince William County approved 22 million square feet of data centers directly adjacent to the national park. The incentive to say yes is pretty strong. So you need to be prepared to fight for that.
On
Does that
that,
help?
we had, by the way, we had 63 participants online and we had 2 in the room, so this was a pretty big footprint.
Great. Thank you very much for coming out on a hot night.
We continue to appreciate the PEC efforts and everybody, we will be posting on the RLEP.org. So Rappahannock Environmental Protection will continue to try to